Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm talking about BookTube's favorite books that I have no intention of reading. So before I get into this, I did think maybe this video would have a bit of a negative tone or feel to it, so this is a bit of a disclaimer saying that in no way am I judging people who do read and really enjoy or even love these books. These are just some books that I've seen around in the community a lot and that I just have no interest in reading for one reason or another. I think we're going to notice that many of my reasons are pretty dumb or shallow for not reading these. So if anything, it says something about me. But without further ado, let's get into these. So all of these books have been very popular on BookTube in the past or are still very popular, and the first one I'm going to talk about is Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi. I actually know very little about this book or this series. I know that the first book is called Shatter Me. That's it. I think there's an Unravel Me at some point. I have no clue. I just looked up a bit of a summary, which I've already mostly forgotten, but I think it's about a 17-year-old girl who, when she touches people, those people die. And I think it's a bit of a dystopian story, and I don't know why, but I just have no interest in reading this. It may have to do with the fact that I don't read much dystopian, but I think it's mostly to do, and here the shallowness comes in, with the title. There's something about Shatter Me that just turns me off the book, and the cover I don't really like. It's purplish with... Wait, you're seeing it right here, I don't have to describe it. I've never read anything by this author before, but these books just don't appeal to me at all. But I do want to read another one of her books, which is A Very Large Expanse of Sea, which I think is about a Muslim girl and the aftermath of 9/11, and that sounds very interesting to me. So I do really want to read that one. The second book or series that I have no interest in reading is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And I know this might be a controversial one, because this book or this series seems to be loved all throughout BookTube. Now, I've read and loved Throne of Glass. I've read the entire series. I liked all of the books, although I did get more critical of them as the series progressed. There were some things I really didn't like by the end, like the heteronormative pairing of the main characters. But I did enjoy those books, I think mostly because I was so invested in them, because I read them for years and I really loved the first couple of books. But when these books came out, I think I considered reading them at some point. I know very little about them. I know it's about a woman, she might be fairy, but I don't think so, who is kidnapped, and then she falls in love with someone called Reese, I think, or Rysand, I have no clue. I know very little about this book. I just know it doesn't appeal to me at all. It sounds like more tropey, fairy stuff. And I've heard it includes many more of Sarah J. Maas's sex scenes, and I didn't enjoy those in Throne of Glass. On to the third series, or multiple series, which is another controversial one, I think. And that's Cassandra Clare's books in the Shadowhunter realm. I've actually done some preparation for this and I've written down the names of the series. Let me check. They're The Mortal Instruments, The Infernal Devices, and The Dark Artifices. All those titles sound completely the same to me, so I have no idea which one's which. I've seen so many people talk about these series. I think they're fantasy, right? Urban fantasy maybe? I don't know. I've seen people talk about Cassandra Clare's Shadowhunter books ever since I started watching BookTube. Everybody seems to love them. Everybody seems to have read these books when they were teenagers. I didn't. I didn't know about these books when I was a teenager, and I have no intention of reading them now. Not only is it very intimidating to have to read, like, how many books are there? 15, 20, 30, 100? Before getting to the end of this and knowing what everyone's talking about. It also just sounds like a lot of tropey and cliché-y things happen in these books. I know a lot of people love them because of nostalgic reasons, and I just think that if I were to start reading them now, they would fall flat for me. So I'm just not even going to start. The next book I'm not going to read is Nevernight by J. Kristoff, which is another fantasy series. This at one point actually was on my TBR. I've never owned the book, but I was interested in reading it. This is an adult fantasy series about a 16-year-old girl who goes to an assassin school because she wants to avenge the deaths of her family. Somebody murdered her family and she wants to murder them in return, I guess. At one point this sounded very good to me, I think partly because I loved Illuminae, which is a sci-fi series written by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I adored those 3 books and I figured I would like more of Jay Kristoff's works. But then I read Aurora Rising last year, which is the first book in the new sci-fi trilogy by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, and I really didn't like it. If you want to see my review of that, I'll leave it up above. But somehow the bubble of Jay Kristoff's writing kind of burst for me. It felt too showy, too flashy, too I want to be funny, I want to be hip. And I really didn't enjoy that, and I didn't enjoy the characters either. And by that point I pushed Nevernight back on my TBR. But earlier this week I watched Read with Cindy's review of Nevernight. And she kind of trashed the book, and for reasons that seem kind of solid. She wondered why a 40-year-old man writes about a 16-year-old girl in such a sexual way. For example, apparently the 16-year-old main character has a boob job because that will make her a better assassin. Not something I'm interested in reading about. I'll leave Cindy's video up above as well. I know a lot of people love these books, so maybe I'd love them too if I'd read them. But based on the many quotes Cindy read out in her video, I would just roll my eyes at this book a lot. A lot. Then there's one that's a little less popular, I think, but it is one that I have seen around a lot lately, and that is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco, I think her name is, I'm not sure. This is a mystery book, I think. It's the first in a series, and I have no idea what it's about. I just know that I really don't like the title, and I really don't like the cover. There's something about both of those things together that just make me not want to read this book and stay far away from it. Not for any particular reason, it's just that the title of the book sounds like a bad book to me, and the cover of the book also seems like a bad book to me. Again, very shallow. I know nothing about this book. I've heard very good things, although I've also heard that the first book, Stalking Jack the Ripper, is kind of predictable, which is not a thing I enjoy in mysteries. But yeah, not going to read that one. Sorry. Then we're moving on to an older series, which is Divergent by Veronica Roth. At the height of its popularity, I think Divergent must have been almost as popular as The Hunger Games, if not as popular. But I have never read it, and I've never felt inclined to read it either. I'm fine with just having read The Hunger Games in terms of YA dystopian. For some reason, I'm just not that interested in YA dystopian novels, even though I really did enjoy The Hunger Games. I read them a little later than most people. I read them in 2014, I think. But I love those books. Nevertheless, Divergent never appealed to me. I think it's about a girl, and in this dystopian world there are different factions that you end up in. And there's a lot of drama, and there's romance and action. And that's pretty much all I know. It just never really seemed like it would add something new to the dystopian novels I'd already read. And now it just seems like those books came out so long ago that there's no point in reading them anymore, even if I was interested. Like I said, I'm fine with just sticking to The Hunger Games. Which brings us to the last book, and kind of the one that prompted this whole video, which is A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. Or, as I wrote it down in my notes, A Songbird Snake. Apparently that title is too long for my tiny brain to remember. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last few weeks, you know what the Songbird of Snakes... There I went again. A Ballad of Songbird and Snakes is about. It is a prequel story to The Hunger Games, set about 60 years before the original trilogy, I think, and it centers around Coriolanus Snow, who is the villain from The Hunger Games, and he is generally seen as one of the worst villains YA books have ever seen. He is terrible and awful and blech. And when it was announced that this prequel was going to be about him, I just stopped being interested right away. I know a lot of people have felt the same way, and I know that there has been outrage within the community or within bookland in general that we would get another villain origin story for a white man who did absolutely terrible things. And although I'm not outraged, I am exasperated. I have no interest in reading another white guy's villain origin story. And the book came out last week or 2 weeks ago, something like that. And reviews have been popping up all over the place. And I've seen mostly disappointed reviews. people just aren't very impressed with what Suzanne Collins did for President Snow. I've seen people say that the book is simply too long and just drags on a bit and that the pacing is off. And a lot of people have said that they are very interested in what is shown in terms of the Hunger Games, because the book shows the 10th Hunger Games, I think. So the Hunger Games is still in its early stages, and you can see how it developed from then until the Hunger Games as we know it in the Hunger Games trilogy. So that does sound interesting to me, but a lot of people have said that Snow just isn't that interesting of a character to read about, and his story doesn't seem very valuable, and that just made me think that I just don't want to read this. I'm right in thinking I'll just let this pass me by. Although I have to say that Elena from Elena the Great made some very interesting points in her review. She actually gave the book 5 stars. She made a very interesting video about the Hunger Games earlier, and now she's made a very good one about A Ballad of Songbird and Snakes as well. And in her video she talks about how A Ballad of Songbird and Snakes is full of political theory, that it's about Hobbes versus Locke, about are people intrinsically violent or are they not? And that does sound interesting to me. That is one thing that will almost make me pick up the book, because political theory sounds very interesting to me, and the things Elena describes in her video sound really good. I just don't feel like reading a 600-page book about a villain I hated to get that background information, I guess. So yeah, even though Elena almost had me convinced, I'm just not gonna do it, I'm sorry. So those are some of BookTube's favorite books that I won't be reading. What I find interesting is that there are no contemporary novels on this list. I don't have a clear favorite genre, but I think contemporary is probably it. I'm always open to reading contemporary novels. There's not been many of those that I'll say beforehand I will never read that. But yeah, most of the books I came up with for this video were fantasy. And I really do love fantasy, and I love YA fantasy, but I guess my tastes in that genre are a bit more particular. I don't know. Let's not discuss the psychology behind my choices. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Please like this video if you liked it, and in the comments below tell me about one book you have no interest in reading, even though it seems to be a favorite around here. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my content, and have a wonderful day. Bye!